The last two sessions, Rick Weinecke from Arad, Israel, has shared with us some different stories and things in his own life, how he came to begin to hear the Lord and the role that played in setting his course. There's many stories he could tell, and that would emphasize much of what he's already said. But today and in our last session, I want to focus on a question or two for Rick that I think is going to be useful for anyone who is either at the beginning or is struggling with hearing the Lord. And so, Rick, my question for you today is this. As you begin to hear the Lord, as you've shared already, and as you begin to grow in hearing the Lord, what were some of the biggest obstacles in your way? What was it that might have stood in your way so that you thought you couldn't hear the Lord, or were there things that just seemed not impossible, but that made it more difficult to hear the Lord?
Right. Probably the way I would put it is, anytime I've tried to explain this to anyone, I always say I think I always believed that there was within a relationship with the Lord, like any relationship, there has to be conversation. And I always tried to explain to people, if my closest earthly relationship is my wife, Daphne. And I know that the relationship wouldn't be really very good if I spoke to her maybe once a week for about 15 minutes, and maybe it was even formal. Like I would write what I'm talking to her, and a lot of times, even on that level, I would expect that she would speak back to me. It wouldn't be just a one-sided direction. So I always felt like from the very beginning that the reality of the Lord communicating is something for sure. So I had no doubts about it.
Okay,
I was intrigued by.
so if someone is struggling with this, one of the first things they need to grab, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'll probably interrupt, is they need to grab is that God does want to speak. He does want to communicate. This is not an issue of impossibility or something in God or even something in us that would say God's not going to speak to me.
But the issue is, I can live within all of those justifications if I want to lead a religious life.
Yeah.
But if I want to have a relationship with God, I have to believe that we can communicate one with another.
Okay.
It just has to be there. The communication has to be there, or it just becomes religious format. Either that I decide to do, or I go to a place and a pastor dictates to me, or a denomination tells me how I need to behave within this religious framework. But if somehow I have to want a relationship with God. And I have to want this thing. And if I want it, I will search for him. And just like what we spoke about before, sometimes desperation is a motivation because the religious stuff isn't carrying, it doesn't give me a solution to anything. When push comes to shove and I come up against stuff, all the rules and how to do it and everything, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so I have to have a relationship with him. But I always realize that within the communication part of the relationship, I always believe that God is a communicator for sure. But So in the communication, if there's a problem, it's going to be me, not him. So I have to somehow bring myself into a position or deal with my own fears, say, or my own whatevers, in order to be able to hear him, because he wants me to hear him. If I believe he's my father, I would expect from my earthly father dialogue. It would help me grow to listen to him, but for him to give me time to speak so he's listening also to me is
Right.
fantastic. I love that. But I would always say it's not so much it isn't necessary, at least for me, the idea of the communication. The communication's there, so you struggle. Is this really the Lord or not the Lord?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it bothers the Lord at all that we test these things, because we need to test these things, because there's a lot of voices out there and there's a lot of things vying for our attention. I don't think he minds us testing. But once we do understand that it's him communicating, my biggest problem personally has always been it demands a response. And a lot of times I don't like what he wants from me. And I'm like, there's been times where I said, Lord, you know what? We've done this, this, and this, like asking us at one point to join a settlement on the West Bank, the territories in Israel, which is not it's a great story, but it's way too long. But I said to the Lord, I understand what you're saying to me. It's becoming clear because I'm trying to prove that this is you. And in a way, I'm hoping that it proves not to be you, because I don't really like what's being said.
Yeah.
And so there's a desire in there for that part. But it's almost like I've tried to say to the Lord, but we've done this for you already. It's enough. You're too extreme. You're asking too much. And I'm not willing to die to my own will in this. Because I know that for me to respond to what the Lord is communicating to me, something in my nature has to die. And in a way, this is fine with the Lord, because it brings life. It brings what you had said earlier, the sense of understanding his glory, his presence. I want to know he's present in my life. And for him to be present in my life, there has to be an ongoing dialogue between him and between me. But it's like the hope is that I begin to mature. And a lot of us don't like to grow up, because growing up brings levels of responsibility. Yeah, it brings us into a closer relationship, but it also brings levels of responsibility. And so it's like, now I'm having to hear what he wants. It isn't just me writing a Christmas list and saying, this is what I want you to do for me. Or also, like what we had talked about, it's almost like me deciding, wow, what a cool idea this would be. And I'll Christianize it enough, or I'll believersize it enough, that this brings glory to you. And it's almost like I'm trying to sell the Lord on my idea on how this is going to further his kingdom. And he'll go, wow, what a great idea. And somehow he will bless it. But I've always been aware of the fact that he knows better than what I know. And my great ideas, they can be pretty out there sometimes, but his are better. And in a sense, that I would say is my biggest block, is my resistance, because I know he's saying it. I know he wants something, but I'm not sure I have the ability, but it's not even that. I know, because he'll make it happen. He will give me the ability to do the thing, but I sometimes think that it's unreasonable, and I'll argue. it out.
Yeah, that you just don't have the will to do it. You just don't want to do it. Just don't
I
want to
just
do
don't
it.
want to do it. Yeah. It's like I feel like, no, I've weighed this thing out. I've done enough.
Let me ask you this. For especially in a time like this where there's a lot of things that are unsure and thus there's opportunity for a lot of different kinds of fear. And oftentimes people get serious about God when they're afraid, and they begin to try to talk to God, but then they get frustrated because they don't hear God talking back to them, and they're asking Him for things, but they don't hear Him say what He wants to do, or they don't because fear is a companion idea to worship, depending upon how worship is what you listen to. If you fear something, you're going to listen to it. You're going to respond to it instead of something else and someone else. So put this together. What do you see is helpful for you at times of fear, and especially at times when you're trying to get God's attention, but you just don't seem like you're getting through? Do you ever have those times?
You know what?
You can
No.
be, yeah.
I have to be
Okay.
really honest.
No, be real. Why do you not have? Okay, let me ask you then, because this is a common experience for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, that they, from your experience, why wouldn't God respond? Is God obligated to respond to what we pray for?
Well, see, in my mind, I look at it and I think if I've declared him as Lord over my life, and I'm asking him to do something, like, oh, it's also an answer. He's answered me. Yeah, where people say, well, he's not answering. And I'm going, yeah, he did answer. He said no.
Yeah.
He said no. Like I said to my own sons a lot of times, no, no, because I don't think it's a good idea.
But it's not
So
the but
no,
it's not the answer they wanted.
exactly. See, a lot of times we think God is there somehow to serve us
Yeah.
and our emotions or our demands. And it's like sometimes religiosity will say to us, well, just yell louder then, or write a, I don't know, a more compelling newsletter.
Yeah, or
And
take
God will
take more
reply to
time.
me.
Yeah. Yeah, or take more time to do
Make
it.
it, and the trouble is a lot of times when we're trying to convince anybody, we have a tendency to exaggerate. We exaggerate our situation and it borderlines, just making up stories basically, or taking something and really expanding it and somehow trying to convince the listener that he needs to do what we want him to do. And all of us in the natural have that as an ability. Some people are charming, some people can cry right on the spot, people can scream, people can, threaten things.
It's their
I
way to
can't.
persuade God, right?
Yeah,
To present a compelling, persuasive emphasis that God should do this.
right. But the sense is, if he's my father, I believe he will answer, but there is an answer, which is no. If it hasn't happened and it's not going the way I thought it should go, then he has said no.
Okay.
He said no.
Okay.
So then I have to wait, which is difficult for all of us, basically,
Yeah.
is, well, how is the Lord going to solve this? What I think is desperate or demands an answer right off the bat, or demands God to react the way I want him to react and all this stuff. And I realized later from prophetic hindsight is that I look at it, there's been so many times I'll look back because he wants us to remember, right?
Right.
Remembering is a really good thing because then I look back a long time after and I go, oh, praise God, I didn't get what I wanted right then.
Right.
Because if
Right.
I'd have got it, I wouldn't be in the place where I'm at right now. And I
Right.
know that where I'm at is where I'm supposed to be, or this is a much better situation, or whatever. But at that emotional moment where I'm demanding from God that I respond, that it's like, no, no.
Well, I think, and we just have another minute or so. I think one of the
Yeah,
things that happens, we confuse something. There is a very much a real component of being childlike in how you deal with things with God, but not being childish.
right,
Childlike means that, like a child, you defer to God first. You
right,
let Him set the boundaries or the standards for what you want.
right,
Okay? Whereas for a child to demand of a parent what the child wants, but the parent knows the child shouldn't have, that's
right,
childish.
right,
That's what happens when you
right,
go into a grocery store and you go by a candy counter with a 3-year-old. They always
right,
want that candy, whether
right.
it's suitable for them or not. So, I think that part of this is coming to that place, like you said from the very beginning, in realizing this is about a relationship with God Himself.
Right.
It's not about right answers, wrong answers. It's not about knowing your destiny or not knowing your destiny. It's
Right,
about knowing Him, and He becomes all that your destiny is bound up in.
right. And see, if we claim an attachment to the person of Jesus, then we begin to see God as a father,
Right.
and not just as a power out there that we hope is on our side, or we can get that power to do what we want it to do, basically. But this is a father, and so a father demands genuine relationship. That's what we have to want.